I'm Jason Wright, and this is the Texas Titans Podcast. Just like the name of the podcast suggests, I will be visiting with Texas Titans of business, academia, sports, or whatever their chosen field, looking for the disciplines and habits that have made these Texans so remarkable. Success leaves clues, and I want to crack the code to these Titans' success and share it with you. Thank you for joining me here on the Texas Titans Podcast. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Texas Titans Podcast. This is going to be a really good episode, and I'm so very grateful for you taking the time to listen. Today's guest is Britt Berrett, PhD. Britt is by all accounts a Texas Titan, especially in the field of healthcare. In addition to being a former major healthcare institution CEO, he's also a New York Times bestseller, and he has solidified himself as a premier expert in organizational management and in operations management in the field of healthcare. I'm going to read you his bio just so that you get an understanding of who Britt Berrett is. Britt Berrett served as the president of Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital in Dallas, an 898-bed hospital. In addition to his role as president of the Dallas Hospital, Berrett also served at the system level as an executive vice president of Texas Health Resources. He oversaw strategic planning and operations for Texas Health Dallas, guiding the hospital in its mission to improve the health of the people in the community it serves. While on a 2-year mission in Peru, Berrett developed a great appreciation for the role that healthcare provides can play in improving the quality of life for an entire community. It is in his concern for the quality of life in the community that makes him a passionate advocate for excellence in healthcare and a perfect fit for Texas Health Dallas. Prior to joining Texas Health Dallas, Berrett served as president and chief executive officer of Medical City, a 677-bed hospital, since April 2000. He received his bachelor's degree in finance from Brigham Young University and his master's degree in hospital administration from Washington University School of Medicine in St. Louis. Berrett also received his PhD in public administration from the University of Texas at Dallas. Texas Health Dallas was recognized in 2007 as a U.S. News & World Report Best Hospital for Digestive Disorders, Neurology, and Neurosurgery and Orthopedics specialties. Texas Health Dallas received the Magnet Recognition Program Award for Excellence in Nursing Services from the American Nurses Credentialing Center, ANCC, the nation's largest and leading nursing credentialing organization within the American Nurses Association. Currently, Dr. Berrett is the program director of the Jindal School of Management's undergraduate healthcare management program, as well as the director of University of Texas Dallas's Center for Healthcare Leadership and Management. He lectures nationally and internationally on transformational leadership, organizational change, and performance. In 2013, he co-authored Patience Comes Second, Leading Change by Changing the Way You Lead, which has become a New York Times, USA Today, and Wall Street Journal bestseller. Folks, Britt Berrett is an amazing leader, and I want to tell you right now, you do not have to be in the field of healthcare to appreciate his expertise and to appreciate this interview, nor do you have to be in healthcare to benefit from the book Patience Comes Second. This is a book on leadership, transformational leadership, getting employee buy-in, and executing a culture of working for a purpose rather than just for a paycheck. It's a great book. It's a great read. I highly encourage you to pick it up. If you ever have read anything like Tony C's book, the Zappos CEO, I think his book was Selling Happy, something. I know that's the wrong title, but it's along those lines. You don't have to be a shoe salesman to appreciate Tony C's book. Same thing here. You do not have to be in healthcare to appreciate and benefit from the reading of Patience Comes Second. So pick up a copy, and thank you again for joining us here on the Texas Titans Podcast. I hope you enjoy my interview with Dr. Britt Berrett, and please, I cannot stress enough, please subscribe to the podcast. Please leave a review. Please go to jasonwrightnow.com and check out my blog. Make your own rules. I think you'll enjoy that. And you can also link to the podcast there, or you can go to textitans.blog to look at all of the past episodes of the Texas Titans podcast, as well as go to iTunes to find it, and all the other major platforms where you listen to podcasts. We're going to be there. So please continue to listen. Please tell your friends. Please share it. I'm so grateful for you doing so. And now, please enjoy meeting my friend and a true Texas Titan, Dr. Britt Berrett. Thanks. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Texas Titans podcast. I am here with today's sponsor, which is Office Pride, and the East Texas area developer, David Stein. As you folks know, I want to bring to you real business people, real business leaders, and entrepreneurs. And David Stein is not only a dear friend, but an entrepreneur in every sense of the word. David, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jason. Glad to be a part.
Well, I'm glad you're a part because you're paying the bills today, brother, as my sponsor. Thank you.
Come on.
All right. So first of all, tell me a little bit about how you got involved with Office Pride and what you guys do and what sets you apart from your competitors.
Absolutely. So about 12 years ago, someone I knew from the community had found out about Office Pride. It's one of those businesses that flies under the radar. It's commercial cleaning, janitorial. So it's office cleaning at night. You leave your office, you go away. We come in at night, you come in the morning, and trash is dumped, cleaned, dusted, etc. And so we got into it. We started his franchise. I branched off a couple of years later, started my franchise, and it's been a great ride. It's an unbelievable franchise. It's got great brand recognition. It's got great brand integrity. It's got operations. It's got support. It's got a plan. I'm a corporate America reject. And I just got tired of corporate America after about 30 years. Always wanted to do the entrepreneur thing, but never had the guts to do it.
Right.
Some people have to get thrown off the cliff, and I was one of those people. And so we started it 10 years ago, but never looked back, just excited about it and the opportunity for me, for my family, and what it's allowed us to do.
Well, and I know as Office Pride being a large franchisor and you have become a leader within the organization, tell me what separates you, not only Office Pride from your competitors, but you as a franchisee and a developer for this area. What separates you from the competition?
A lot of it comes down to, it really is the core values that are behind everything what we do. Most of the core values are great customer service things, total brand satisfaction, honesty, integrity, and a hard work ethic. Go the extra mile, accountability to commitments. But the first one is honor God. And in everything that we do, we want to do that would be pleasing to God. And so you can't be almost honest or almost integrity. You're either in or you're out. But it's a process, and it forces us to hire right, to train well, to follow up, and just do the things that we say we're going to do. And that's really what differentiates us is the execution. Our retention rate is 90%. Wow. The industry average is 65%.
Wow.
And there are reasons for that, and it comes in the execution.
Wow. All right, David. So one of the things that I ask every leader that is sitting in that chair or on these interviews is, in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey's book, there's a chapter in which he says you're walking by a church, you hear music, you walk up, you walk in, and you realize you're at a funeral. You see the casket, you walk up, and you realize it's your funeral. When that day comes, when it's all said and done for David Stein, what do you want said about you and your life's work?
Well, other than he is so much like Jason Wright.
You've got to shoot way higher, man.
There's only a few people that could say this, and it would be, I would want my wife Stella to say, I can't imagine my life with any other man, and so glad that we married. And that my 3 daughters would say he's the best daddy that anybody could have ever had.
Well, I can tell you, as someone who has known you for going on 20 years, brother, I think you're definitely on track for that to be the case. I cannot begin to tell you how much I appreciate you believing in me, believing in the Texas Titans podcast, and supporting me in this way, man. Thank you so much.
I'm glad to do it. You and I have been friends for a while. We followed similar paths, but I believe in you. I think this is going to be something, while this can be good for you, I think this is going to be great for people who listen. And so I'm glad to support it. Anybody interested in Office Pride, just Google Office Pride Tyler. It's real. I can give you phone numbers and websites, but Google Office Pride Tyler and you'll find us.
Fantastic. David, thank you, brother.
My pleasure. Thanks, Jason.
All right. Well, Britt Berrett, thank you so very much for taking the time to talk to me this morning.
I'm delighted. Thank you for the invitation.
Well, it's my pleasure. Okay, so literally, all right, for the audience, like the title of the podcast says, this is the Texas Titans podcast, and if ever there were someone that I believe is worthy of that title, it's Britt Berrett. Okay, besides being a top healthcare executive, not only in the state of Texas, but in the entire country, he's also a best-selling author, an advisor, a coach. I mean, from teacher to someone who has executed this in real life, this is the guy. So I think in every single way, Britt, you and your humility, I'm grateful for. So I'm going to do the bragging here because I know you won't do it. In every way, you are a Texas Titan. So thank you so much for being with us today, man.
It's a pleasure. I'm not sure I fit that title, but I'm just grateful to share perspective and perhaps some insights that might be of value to the listeners. I think it's imperative that as we move forward in specifically healthcare, that we share what's successful and what is working and perhaps some lessons learned along the way. So let's jump into it. I'm delighted to be here. Well,
okay, so let's just start with the whole area of healthcare. And what I want to do, I think that there's two really good components that we can dive into, Britt, through the course of this interview, and anything else that you want to as well. One, just the state of healthcare, because there's so much discussion around the topic as it relates to the United States, from a policy standpoint to just a business model standpoint. But also, I want to know, as someone who has been so successful in that space, and as an executive in general, let's talk about that. So, two perspectives. One, healthcare in general. How do we keep improving, getting better? And two, how you have been successful in the space. So let's just back up early in your, let's talk about secondary education or primary education, where you're from, primary education, then where you go to school, and how do you end up in the field of healthcare?
Well, okay. The thumbnail is I grew up in Canada. I was raised, my dad in Vancouver, my father's in the lumber industry, and had a great childhood. Went to Brigham Young and was trying to figure out my life. I was trying to figure out what I was placed on this earth to do, and decided to do missionary work. And honestly, I really highly recommend that for young talent. There's a point in time in your life when you've got to figure out who you are. And I had to figure out my relationship with God and myself and what role I was going to play in this world. And so I lived in Peru for a couple of years, and I saw poverty and community at its best and at its worst. And that set the tone for my life. I was in a fire when I was 15 years old, nearly died from burns, and 25% of my body was burned. And the men and women that worked on me just were amazing. They saved my life, and I was forever grateful for the role that they played and the example they set. So when I went to Peru, I watched healthcare in a different setting, and it was sobering. I recall walking through some of these hospitals where people would call out in anguish for help and assistance. And so when I returned to the United States, I was taken by that. I contemplated our healthcare delivery system. And mind you, this is in the 80s. Mm-hmm. And this is when healthcare was still coming together. We had not really hit the complete corporatization of healthcare era, but we were in a space where there's a lot of change. And I decided to get into healthcare. I did not want to be a doctor. I didn't want to be a clinician. I don't like blood. I don't like any of that.
Right.
But I felt like I could give something to it. And I have a pretty good business mind, so I decided to get my degree in finance, and then went off to Washington University School of Medicine Medical Center, and earned my master's degree there, and then embarked on a 25-year career in healthcare and never looked back. So grateful for being a part of that profession. And it has been changing and exhilarating and fun and enjoyable and rewarding.
Well, and I wanted, I told you we might take, before we got on the podcast, I told you we might take a little bit of a diversion at times. And one of them is I could not agree with you more about doing the mission work. My first ever experience with missions was in a very remote area of the southern Hunan province, kind of at the base of the Himalayas, trekking through areas where, we're talking about areas where people didn't have running water, electricity. It's a whole different universe that these people occupy. And I remember, like what you were saying about the awakening you had with the differences in healthcare. For me, I'll never forget getting off the airplane and just driving down I-30 headed back towards Tyler and seeing just all the stuff we have that,
I remember coming home from Peru, landing at SeaTac Airport, driving to our home and looking at the grass going, that grass is so green.
Right.
How do they get the grass so green? And I'm thinking, what? I really live in a blessed environment, a blessed society.
Yeah.
It was sobering.
Yeah. Whenever you start to, and that's the cool thing about it. And I always tell young people the same thing, or anyone for that matter. I don't care what age you are. If you get the chance, go to either a third world country or at a minimum, a very impoverished area, not to make you feel guilty, but just to kind of get some real perspective of, and it's as small as what a glass of ice water, how amazing that is, because when ice is in abundance, or just a shower whenever you want, take 3 showers a day if you want. It's just crazy, the little things you learn to appreciate. So I can totally relate to that. So, okay, well, getting back to your early stages of your career. All right. So where do you get started in the healthcare industry? You decided, you want to be in the field. So how does that start and what are you doing?
I looked at the complexity of healthcare and I saw so much inefficiencies, and everyone sees that. Anyone that goes to a doctor's office, why do you have to wait 2 hours? Mm-hmm. Well, why do you have to struggle to get your pharmacy drugs? Why do you have to have multiple bills coming at you? It was one question after another in the healthcare delivery system that was confusing and confounding. And I asked myself, why can't we just make this easier for people? Mm-hmm. I recall sitting in a doctor's waiting room and thinking to myself, I can probably get into Chili's restaurant faster than I can be seen by this doctor.
Right.
Why can't we use predictive analytics? Why can't we use scheduling and queuing models in a physician's office or even in an emergency room, for crying out loud? And so that curiosity, that intent to improve, really, when you get into healthcare, it's just so confounding. So I decided to jump in with both feet, and I used many of the tools that I learned in business school in the healthcare delivery system. That moved me ahead very quickly. And by 31, I was a hospital CEO in San Diego, California. It was a great experience, and in that role, I started making changes and creating possibilities, and I was able to do things that perhaps I wasn't able to do lower on the totem pole or lower on the ladder. So when I hit that CEO, I could make some very purposeful, intentional changes and decisions, and I found a force multiplier. The list goes on and on. I gave examples of waiting in a waiting room. How about just collecting copays and deductibles? If anyone's gone to a doctor's office, they know they pay their copay and the deductible. Then they wait for the insurance company to tell them, well, if they've met their deductible, if they've met their copay, what more they have to pay. And just this briar bush of bills that you can't quite wrap your arms around. And then the anesthesiologist sends a bill and the radiologist sends a bill. So one of the real big things I did was work on our billing process and system so it was convenient, comfortable, and helpful for a patient. And that propelled me up to additional ranks and roles and responsibilities. Every time I was concerned about the patient's experience and found solutions, it really propelled my career. And So at the age of 36, I was invited to run a very large hospital here in Dallas, almost a 600-bed facility with 2,100 employees. And what I found is my ambition got ahead of me. I was so excited about the title and here's a funny story. So I'm negotiating the contract. Right? I'm saying to them, hey, I'd love to move from beautiful San Diego to Dallas. I've never been to Dallas, but I love Texans and I love the climate and the business community. I really need a country club membership. And I was so full of myself. I was like, I need the country club life. And they're like, well, we're not in it. They said, sure. So went through all these jumps and hoops and so as part of the negotiation, I got a country club membership. And I was so excited. I went home to my wife and I said, we are now members of a country club. And she looks at me and she goes, we don't even go to a country club. You'll golf occasionally, but what are you thinking? And, it's kind of your ego gets ahead of you. And I said, no, honey, this is the new life. I'm now a CEO in Texas and blah, blah, blah. I never went to the country club, but maybe once for lunch. I just was too busy, too many responsibilities. That part of my life was filled with Jaws, my wife, my kids, my faith. And I guess by year 2, I canceled the country club membership. The lesson I learned from that is sometimes you get filled up with yourself, and you got to take a big deep breath and say, you know what, not the best choice. So I started leading this organization, and it was in disarray. It really was a difficult situation. I was the 4th CEO in 4 years.
Wow.
There had just been this turnover of CEOs. I brought the Gallup organization in, and I asked them to survey our employees. I asked them to survey them to ask them how we were doing. And they came back, and the consultants from Gallup walked in my office with the executives, and they said, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And so give it to me. He says, well, the good news is we completed the survey. And I said, okay, bad news. He said, we define your hospital as a toxic work environment.
Wow.
And I said, what do you mean by that? He said, well, 38% of your employees, when surveyed, are actively disengaged. They're actively don't like working here. And you've got a 35% turnover rate. You're spending $1 million a month on agency nursing, meaning you can't fill the spots with employees. So you're calling outside agencies to have nurses come in. You've got a real dilemma. And I looked at my sweetheart and I said, went home and I said, what did we do? We've moved from beautiful San Diego to wonderful Texas, but in a job that really is it's not all it was made out to be. And I think I made a conscious decision and decided that we have a role and responsibility to bless the lives of the people in the community. We really do. And this organization needs strong leadership, and let's go for it. And so I brought the executive team together and embarked on a journey, an adventure, one of the greatest times of my professional career. And we changed that organization. And I was there 10 years. And during that time, we were selected as the best place to work by the Dallas Business Journal, the first hospital in DFW to ever receive that award.
Wow. One
of the top 50 best places to work in the state of Texas. We received the state award, the Malcolm Baldrige Award at the state level for quality excellence. We were the first in Dallas to receive the Magnet Certification in Nursing. This is the highest accolade a nursing service can receive. Our quality issues were superior, and our financial outcomes were, well, when I left, Forbes magazine identified our hospital as one of the top 20 most profitable hospitals in the United States. It was a great adventure and very rewarding, and I learned a lot of things along the way. And as I was navigating this with a great team, I'm just amazing men and women, I kept on asking, there's got to be some reason behind this. Mm-hmm. What are we doing different? Because around us, hospitals were closing, consolidating. I was part of an 11 hospital system, and while we kept on achieving success indicators, the other ones were were just not moving. We received $300 million in capital. We built a children's hospital. We built a child care center on site. We built a critical care tower. And the parent corporation just saw great success and kept on investing in us to their benefit and to our benefit. But I thought there's got to be some reason behind this. And so I was on an advisory committee at the University of Texas at Dallas, and they announced that they were starting a PhD program in the School of Economics. And I was very curious. I reached out to them. They said, yeah, in fact, we are. We're trying to find key leaders in different industries to participate in a unique cohort program for PhDs. And so I enrolled. So, anyone that's gone back to school while working knows that it is a beating. But I was surrounded by higher education, law enforcement, city administration, technology, and I was the healthcare guy. And together that group matriculated through 4 years, and I completed my PhD. Even today, it's been 10 years. We meet every Christmas, and there are about 10 of us that made it through and laugh and have fun. Quite a few are in academics, quite a few are in public administration, law enforcement. One worked for the OIG. So it's just an eclectic group of men and women. But I learned some important truths because my dissertation was on the convergence of strategic planning and leadership. Does how you lead have an impact on your strategic outcomes? And intuitively, that's true, right? We've had good bosses, bad bosses, and you learn a lot from both. How you lead, will it create success? And the answer is emphatically yes. Empirically, we proved it to be true. And so I finished my PhD, and that was my work. I'm probably sharing too much.
No, that's perfect because
push me in a direction.
Well, I see a theme that led to a best-selling book in all that. Just as I'm sitting here listening to the story, because I got to believe, being definitely a relatively young senior executive, you take over the hospital or take over the leadership role, and like anyone else, if I'm in that job, I'm the CEO of a hospital, I'm going to be thinking of, first the patients, then the economics of the business. What's the P&L look like? Are we running lean? Are we running too fat? Just the kind of typical metrics that you look at whenever you're looking at a business. So correct me if I'm wrong, and this is kind of the way I follow a story. You come in with kind of a typical CEO's metric-minded mindset to evaluate the state of the business, and then you get this survey back and realize we've got to do something with our human capital that we have here, and you set about executing that. Now, I can also imagine young, new CEO goes to his board of directors and says, hey guys, guess what? We need to not worry quite as much about the patients as we need to worry about our own employees and them looking at you like you've got three heads. So my question is, one, am I on the right track? And two, if that was the case, how did you make that argument to start to get, because look, it's almost taboo, just like you mentioned in your book, which we're going to get to in a minute, that when you even mention that the patient comes behind anything with regard to be it a hospital, minor clinic, anytime you say anything other than, quote unquote, the customer is always right and the customer comes first, people almost look at you like, you've got to be kidding me. You recognize that, okay, we've got to focus on something else other than the patient to make sure the patient gets the care delivered to them that is superior to where they would get at any other facility. So take me through how you began the process. How did you get buy-in? Who did you get buy-in from? How did you deliver that message to your board and those that you would rely on for the resources and the support to execute your vision? And kind of what was that vision? What was your plan to take that survey and turn it around?
Well, a jumble of experiences, but if you're a new talent and you're entering a new organization, you've got to recognize that the success of the organization is dependent upon the men and women with you, the men and women in that room. And I had that remembrance of remembrance of the burn unit at Harborview Hospital in Seattle. These men and women loved each other, respected each other, worked so well together, and you could feel this camaraderie of success, and it resulted in my successful treatment. I knew I wanted to work with great men and women. I just knew it, and it was very popular in those days to force employees to do what was deemed necessary for them to do. So, for example, we're going to have you all wear name tags and color-coded scrubs, and we're going to give you phrases that you will use every time you visit a patient. So you'll see that sometimes in the retail industry where, is there anything more that I can do to assist you, or something of that nature. You can tell if someone's being honest and sincere, or they're just checking a box and saying what was told to them to be said. You just feel it. You know that. And I didn't want that. I wanted men and women who just loved each other and loved working together, because I knew that they would create success. And if they didn't, then perhaps they needed a greater education and training, and that's where I would exert my effort. But I wanted them to be working with great men and women. I had also a kind of a tough experience early in my career as an assistant administrator, and I had the worst boss in the world. And I absolutely loathed her. And it sounds harsh, but she was so brutally painful as a boss. She did everything. Her intent was to have me quit. And so it was 6 months of living hell. And I knew that when she was doing that really I was affected negatively in terms of my performance. But I also was less than a father and less than a husband and less than a man of faith and less in my community, because I just felt lousy about myself. And I thought, I'm never going to do that to anyone. I'm never going to create an environment where someone hates being where they are. And interestingly enough, as I left that organization, I went down and popped her name plaque off the door, and I took it with me.
Oh, wow.
And I have it with me today in my home office, because it's a reminder that I never wanted to be that kind of boss. Anyway, when I was working on my dissertation, I was looking at what we had done differently, and we built the leadership team, and then we built the employees. So there's a raging debate at the executive team level. There are about 7 of us on the executive team: chief financial officer, chief nursing officer, HR director, marketing, quality. We're all sitting at the table. There's raging debate about, well, let's work with our employees. And my conclusion was, no, let's build the executive team. Let's create trust. And let's build the managers and directors and give them skills and talents and get rid of the bad ones and promote the good ones. That then trickled throughout the organization. So that was really a push for me. And that was in contrast to maybe the current thinking of the day, where it was, as I mentioned before, hey, give everyone good uniforms and X, Y, and Z. We started seeing success early on. I got a lot of pressure for fiscal performance. There's no question about that. And I had to resolve in my own mind's eye what it meant to earn money in healthcare. And I think the blessing I had was healthcare has got so many inefficiencies. I just introduced some smart business practices that resulted in strong economic performance. Stuff like predictive staffing. You know how many. Sometimes you'll have organizations look at their emergency room and they'll say, okay, well, we're just going to staff it with 10 nurses and 10 nursing aides and 3 physicians and a couple pharmacists, and you're done. And I worked with the team to say, well, when are the most patients coming in? We found that the majority of our patients were coming in from 5 until midnight. So let's staff up during those hours and lower staffing during the day when we didn't have as many patients. Well, of course, that threw turmoil into the organization that had been comfortable with, flat staffing. So we used predictive staffing. Huge economic gain on that. So that's a smart business practice we inserted into the delivery of healthcare that paid dividends to us. And then when people were saying, "Oh, you're making so much money," I kept on pointing out the economics that we create allow us to do things that will continue to benefit the community even further. So, a new children's tower, a new emergency room, a new ER with both adult and pediatrics. I mean, so I think we were justified in demanding fiscal accountability and performance because we were investing back into the facility. So we're doing all these things and having the success, and it was very rewarding. And the board was very supportive. I think the naysayers were the ones at the corporate office who weren't sure that this focus on employees made a lot of sense. And I guess that's where, when they talk about courage, that's courage in leadership, when you know it's the right thing to do, but you have a lot of people on the sidelines Skyping at you,
right?
on the sidelines complaining or critiquing. If you know it's right, you just keep pushing forward. And if you know it's the right thing to do, you keep going and you stay strong. And you surround yourself with men and women who feel the same way because they can give you encouragement. There were a lot of lonely nights and dark times when we didn't perform as we thought we might. And the naysayers came out of the woodworks to say, "See, I told you. And that's a dark time. That's a hard time. That's when leaders have to have courage. And there's value in creating a group of friends and colleagues that support you during your difficult times. And I would suggest it's important for you to be there for others who are going through similar type of challenges, to be there to support them as they navigate through difficult times.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I'm going to ask you to get a little more philosophical than you would care to, but hey, that's what this is. We know we're trying to figure out the tools and habits of strong, effective leaders. Where does that come from? Where did you develop that? And what did you do throughout your career to continue to, in those dark moments where you might be the only person in the room who thinks what you're doing is right, continues on until you are able to prove yourself right? Where did that come from? Was that just you just had an inner a gut instinct? Is it something that you have you've developed yourself through reading, study, looking at other great leaders? Kind of, how did you hone this nebulous thing that we hear of leadership skills? How have you honed yours over the years, and what did you do to nurture that throughout the trajectory of your career?
Well, I think you got to circle yourself with winners and individuals who are supportive and encouraging. You've got, some people call it, your board of advisors.
Right.
I think you find good men and women that are there for your best betterment. At the corporate office, I'll tell you, there are folks that are going after you, that their intent is to step on your forehead on their way to the top. There is no question. We've all seen them. My experience after decades of running this is found that those individuals fall off the ladder and no one's there to pick them up, and you never hear from them again. But during the adventure, during the journey, they'll step on your forehead. And so you find the men and women that support you, that care for you, that want your best, your success, and they have that in mind. So I created a group of men and women that I could call on a regular basis. Some inside healthcare, some outside healthcare. Pete Bastone, Steve Bateman, my father, my sisters. And I add to that God. Mm-hmm. And for me, I believe there's divine direction and inspiration. I had to wrap my brain around the thought that I believe God wants his creations to find comfort in healthcare. And so for that reason, when I came to a weighty decision, I'd get on my knees and pray about it. And if I felt comfort and support, and I'd done all my homework, and I believe in inspiration and perspiration. So I believe you sweat it out and you receive divine direction. But it also was a good check for example, if you've got a good friend and you ask a question, I'm thinking about starting a diabetes program. And they can say, "Are you an idiot? That doesn't make any sense whatsoever." "Yeah, but I want blah, blah, blah." a good friend, a good mentor will hold you accountable and give you perspective, and valuable perspective. So that helped me navigate through those difficult times and those dark times when I wasn't sure I was doing the right thing. I remember I made a huge, colossal decision in the organization regarding salaries, wages, and benefits that were to the benefit of the organization, but they negatively impact the other 11 hospitals in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. I gave raises to my nurses, and I got a call from my boss, got called to his office. And I mean, I got a reaming out like I have never had before. And I walked out of that meeting just staggering. And I called my dad and I said, Dad, I think I'm going to get fired. This is what I did. He goes, do you feel it was the right thing to do? And I said, yeah, I do, Dad. I think we needed to pay equitably and fairly. And he said, you did the right thing, but you did it the wrong way. And you probably will get fired. And it's a painful lesson for you to learn, but that's the deal. And so I took a week off. I really thought I was going to get fired. I didn't get fired, but I never repeated that decision again. And and maybe I got a little cavalier and forgot, who the boss was. So, you're destined to make stupid decisions. Having a group of friends and advisors around you that can help you, guide you is important. I think you need to do that for other friends. One of my closest friends, we've been together for almost 30 years. He was the first one of this group to become a CEO. And he was all full of himself, and he was in that role, and he was a friend, but he was kind of rubbing it in my nose that I was still an assistant and he was a CEO. And he was in that job maybe a year, and he got fired. And he fell into a lot of really deep depression. And I called him every day on my way to work, every single day. I called him up. Hey, Brian, how's it going, buddy? And it really had an impact on him that I cared that much about him. And we today are the closest of friends. And so you've got to be there for others as well. It's not just about you. It's about extending yourself to a group of men and women whose relationships you cherish and are building and additive. And they use the term weed the garden. Sometimes you have to pick and choose people that will be strengths and encouragers for you and weed the garden of negative influencers. And so that's what helped me navigate through these challenges.
Well, I think that there's so much wisdom in that. I know throughout my career, and like you, I bought my first company when I was 28, so I was too young. I didn't know what I didn't know. And my biggest problem, I just talked to the last guy that I interviewed. He was like us, an executive or in a pretty substantial leadership role at a very young age. And with that comes a whole host of problems, not the least of which is your ego is a little harder to keep in check because, again, you just don't know what you don't know and you think you know way too much. And what it sounds like you did was you realized the value in having people you can go to and just ask those tough questions. Am I doing the right thing? Have I done? That's where I think I messed up. And I try to really, like I mentor a lot of undergrads that want to own their own businesses and want to understand entrepreneurship. And the thing I always tell them is, the most important thing you can do is be willing and courageous enough to ask questions. It doesn't mean you're not stupid if you ask questions, because it took me nearly 40 years before I would just ask questions. And I always, folks, I've mentioned this on the podcast before that people ask me, was it worth it to get your MBA at SMU? And I tell them, you know what? Yes, but not for the reasons you may think. It's not the technical skills that made it worthwhile. I could have learned how to calculate the weighted average cost of capital anywhere. What it did for me was being around a bunch of smart people and watching them ask questions and then honing my skills as a questioner. What are the right questions to ask, and then having the courage to ask them. So I think that the fact that you had the understanding to surround yourself with people that you could, and then I know you do a lot more teaching and coaching now. I think we as leaders, at least for me, there have been times whenever I just don't think that I'm doing that well at all. I don't really think I have as much to offer. And then someone will call me and go, hey, can you help me work through this problem? And it keeps those skills sharp, and it also helps you remember the value you have. Just because you haven't used a set of skills or a knowledge set in a while doesn't mean you don't still have them. And I think so always finding people that you can pour into. I've learned that's one of the most beneficial things for me as I've grown. It's just a person it's always giving. If you're willing to give of whatever resources you have, especially intellectually or time, just that resource of time, like you calling your friend, that always seems to pay dividends. And you never know, 20 years later, that individual may end up being why you take the next leap forward, because they can vouch for you and say, yeah, the guy's run an 800 bed organization and now he's ready for a 1,200, 13, whatever 100 bed organization, because I've known him for 20 years. I mean, is that right?
Oh, you're spot on. I think there's also great value in reaching out. I mean, if I'm a young talent right now, I think there's no harm in calling someone who's recently retired and saying, can I take you to lunch? Can I take you to breakfast? Can I just drop off in your office and just spend 30 minutes and talk with you? Do you have a moment for me to just ask you some questions to and from work on your cell phone? Whatever it is. I found that of great value. I still have to do that today. Doug Hawthorne, past CEO of THR, one of the great leaders of my life. He reached out with a question regarding something. And I said, Doug, do you have a moment to go out to breakfast? And so about 2 weeks ago, we went out to breakfast. And I picked his brain on his view on leadership and what's the downside of that. And so I think great leaders learn lessons. And so there's no harm in reaching out to them to ask, what do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And I also think those that have retired, if they back away from that opportunity, that role to be a mentor, I think they shrivel up and die. I really believe that to be true.
Yeah.
So if you've had a long and successful career, or maybe you haven't, maybe you've just learned a lot of lessons. Teaching is such a great experience. I have executives come on a regular basis to lecture in my classroom, and usually 2 or 3 a semester. They're usually the favorite lectures of my students. I hate to say it, but I thought, hey, I'm a great lecturer. Now, they love to hear a different perspective from a retired executive or someone who is at the end of their career. Give them words of advice. So on both sides of this coin, those early careers and also those seasoned veterans, talking together can be very powerful and very fruitful.
Well, and and look, case in point, I want to let the listener know, because I know that a lot of my listeners are those younger aspiring entrepreneurs, business leaders, and I always tell them, reach out to those who are as many notches above, and above may be the wrong word, but in accomplishment, wisdom, just years of experience. Reach out to them. And look, I started a podcast. It's called Texas Titans. It's people that I believe are very successful. They've executed well in their careers and in life. And people have been so willing to share, and you're a shining example of that. I mean, I'm sitting here as a new podcaster. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just figuring this out as I go. And someone like you, best-selling author, extremely accomplished healthcare executive, says, yeah, Jason, I'll talk to you. And I want that to resonate with everyone that's listening to this. If you're stuck in your career, if you're in your career and you're over your head and you're not, I tell every young executive, if you feel like you don't know everything you should to do your job, then that means you're probably in the right job. Because what got you there is not going to keep you there. You've got to keep growing. And so be willing to reach out to those folks that have been right where you are, because they're willing to share. People are kind. They're willing, and that's why, again, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you would take this time with me, because it's a perfect example in real life that if you just reach out in a kind, respectful way, people are really kind and willing to share their experiences and their knowledge with you, and generally want to see others succeed. So don't hesitate to just go ask.
Well, and think about the listeners of this podcast. You think about the men and women who are curious about the title and
Right.
the speakers. They are a very small sliver of the population.
Right.
And I've said it time and time again, success is just 1 degree of difference. You know, the difference between 99 degrees and 100 degrees is hot water versus steam power.
Right.
So if you just take that small effort, that small that call, that inquiry, the dividends are huge. So guys like me who have been there, done that, I'll tell you, I committed myself that I would reach out and help. And so when you call, there's no question. If I can fit it in, I'm there. I have students regularly that pop into my office. My office is actually on the 2nd floor where all the classrooms are. The majority of the faculty are on the 4th and 5th floor, 3rd and 4th floor, where you don't see a lot of student traffic. Mm-hmm. And I like it because when I have the door open, they can pop in and we can talk. I like to track those individuals who take advantage of those conversations to see if they do so with others, and it propels their career forward. I believe it does, and so take note of that to the listeners.
Yeah.
Take note of that, and so many of us are willing to give our advice and counsel.
Well, and I couldn't agree more. Well, and talk about you being a professor. One more personal story that I tell every undergrad. I've told my daughters, I don't know where I got this. This is just by God's grace that I had this epiphany whenever I was an undergrad. Because first of all, I'm not a good student. I had to work at it. I really did. And there's 3 things that I did that I think were imperative to my success in undergrad. 1, I showed up to class every single day. I never missed class. Yep. 2, I scheduled classes Monday through Friday because I knew that was a typical work week, and I scheduled them at 8 a.m. So I tried to make my class schedule look like the work week. And then what you're saying, I would schedule a meeting with all of my professors within the first 2 weeks of class because I wanted to meet with them before I needed before I needed to beg for that extra bump to get me up to an A. And without fail, it literally in my entire undergrad career, I kid you not, Britt, there was only one instance in which I was on the cusp of an A or a B that I didn't get the bump at the end of the semester because I'd go to the professor and I go, look, I've been here every day. You know, I've worked hard. I'm this close. Could you please reconsider the score? Every single time, with the exception of Dr. Darvel, a sociology professor at SFA, all the rest, right, Jason? Yes. And so it does. It show up and go to folks and talk to them before you have to. Don't go whenever it's be proactive, not reactive in those relationships, and it will pay dividends.
So true. So true. So true.
Well, let's talk about the book a little bit. I mean, it's not. I mean, you're my first best-selling author, and and so the reader. I mean, excuse me. So the listener knows, Patience Comes Second is not just a book about healthcare. If you've read, Tony C. from Zappos, you've taught guys like this that have truly implemented a culture that has Herb Keller at Southwest Airlines, a legend for implementing a culture that led to happy employees that ended up making for happy, loyal customers. That's what Patience Comes Second is about. I'm not just recommending this book because the author is on my podcast. It's a great book and it's a great read. And it's a quick read too. I mean, it's one of those you can grab at an airport and knock it out on a flight. But tell me what led you to decide to write the book, and let's talk about some of the insights and illustrations that you have in there, Britt. Talk to me. What made you say, "Hey, I need to share this"?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. The discipline of writing a dissertation requires a tremendous amount of research and writing and summarizing and concluding and connecting and a lot of work. And when I finished the dissertation, I was so proud of it. And regrettably, no one read it, right?
Right.
No one cared, right? The tree that fell in the forest. And a buddy called me up, Paul Spiegelman, the co-author, and he said, "Hey, let's write a book together." And he had written a book about culture, He and I have become very good friends, and still today great friends. We talked about leadership behaviors and success elements, and I was serving as the regent for the American College of Healthcare Executives. This is the professional organization for healthcare. And I was a regent and had served for 6 years, and I was all across the United States, and I was speaking and engaging and talking, and I thought, boy, there's a lot of commonality in the research that I did and the lessons I'm learning from the field. And so Paul calls me up and says, let's write a book. And I said, okay. He said, let's give it specifically to healthcare. And the title we worked on was Leading Change by Changing How You Lead. The plea was for leaders to lead differently in healthcare. And that aligned with the dissertation, which was a focus on the difference between transactional leadership and transformational leadership. Mm-hmm. Transactional leaders are 8 to 5, get the job done. I don't care what happens before work. I don't care what happens after work, but 8 to 5, get the job done. If I want you to do more, I'll give you a bonus or pay you more. If I want you to move left, move right. Transformational leaders are men and women that understand the individual and how they fit into the context of the job. And they put them on the right seat on the bus. And if they're not engaged and they don't want to participate, you move them off the bus. But transformational leaders really care about the individual. So there's actually a lot of statistical analysis on this in different industries. I had done this in healthcare. Paul suggested we write the book. So as you mentioned, we wanted to make it fun and easy and filled with stories. So I started interviewing friends and said, give me some stories, give me some quotes. And we identified 10 specific areas where great organizations can change how they lead. And it was the working title was Leading Change by Changing How You Lead. At the last minute, Paul said, let's be a little bit more edgy. Let's change the title to Patients Come Second. And he was spot on. The other thing we did with this book was when I was lecturing, I would speak with people in the audience and afterwards, and it was interesting having a conversation about what kind of organization do you have. And sometimes the executives were delusional. They would tell me, oh, my place is the very best, and we're this and we're that. And you talk to the employees, and they would go, yeah, not so much. No, we suck. Right. And you'd say, So we took the 10 parameters, the 10 dimensions, the 10 areas, and we said, okay, well, let's score them. Let's assess them. Let's do a snapshot survey. So we took the 10 areas. We created a CIQ. You've heard of an IQ. You've heard of an EQ, which is emotional intelligence. Right. This is a cultural IQ. Tell me about your organization. So on a scale of 1 to 10, we would have people score those, and then we would compare them and discuss them. As we were writing the book, we did a lot of field study, did a lot of lecturing, and found that there was a delta in some organizations based on tenure, based on position in the organization. When we finished the book and it was published in March of 2013, it was a really labor of love. We self-published. We used, we wrote it ourselves, so then we gave it to Greenleaf to produce it. It went crazy, Jason. Paul had this, I don't know, some type of ticker that would tell him how many books were sold. We hit that New York Times bestseller list like immediately, 500 here, 1,000 here, 300 there, boom, 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 boom. USA Today bestseller, New York Times bestseller, Wall Street Journal bestseller. And then we started getting a tremendous number of calls. Yep. Now, mind you, I had finished my PhD in 2009, and by 2010, I was going to go and teach. And I actually was planning to teach at SMU. I was adjunct faculty there, and I was going to teach leadership at SMU and working out that. And that's when I get a call from THR, Texas Health Resources, saying, we'd like you to consider this 900-bed hospital. And I said, what a great organization. I really respected Doug Hawthorne immensely and what he had accomplished. And but I said, I also want to be executive vice president for the system. I wanted to see how an integrated delivery system functioned. And so they gave me that opportunity, and I took it, and I was there 5 years. But in 2013, when the book came out, I just got called and inundated with requests, and I did my best to do my day job and also participate in the process. But the book really resonated and continues to resonate with people all across the nation in healthcare. And the lessons we learned, the truths that are told, are so applicable in every industry. Things like find your purpose and your meaning, right? Have fun at work. Get rid of the whiners, the losers, and the jerks. Get involved in the community, which was an interesting one. I mean, these were 10 dimensions of successful organizations that, when applied, create transformation in the organization. And so I fulfilled my commitment to THR for 5 years and decided to go out teaching. And I've been asked to do a lot of consulting. I do a lot of organizational assessments. And so I'm flying out to Boston here in a couple of days, and then to Denver, and then to Florida. It's the summer months for school, so I'm very busy. But I enjoy it because I get to meet with great men and women who feel the same passion. And when you think of healthcare, we've got to figure this out. We have got to figure out the delivery system, make it seamless and efficient and accessible and high quality. And so it's been really a joy, and the book has been a vehicle for conversation for individuals such as yourself and others that feel the same passion.
Well, and let's talk about, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to.
It was interesting. I got invited to the Dallas CPA meeting, and I'm thinking, a bunch of accountants want to hear what I have to say. And so I went to this meeting, and I didn't know there were that many CPAs in DFW. I mean, there were thousands of them up at the Star Center in Frisco, and they wanted to know about healthcare, and they wanted to know how we could create functionality in healthcare. And I really talked about the importance and the imperative of building great teams in healthcare. And it really resonated with the scouts. Afterwards, I had so many of them come up to me and saying, we agree, we've got to address this healthcare issue. How can we get involved? So there is a large group of men and women who feel this passion to improve healthcare.
Well, and this isn't just anecdotal either. I want to take a little bit of snippet out of the book. So you're talking about companies like Zappos, which, if anybody that knows anything about Zappos, besides that's where they might buy their shoes, if you're kind of like guys like us who swim in the soup of understanding businesses and understanding kind of the success behind the business. Zappos is all about customer service. The store, when we were in business school at SMU, we literally in class would call the customer service line, and they have a rule there that you can talk to someone about anything as long as the customer wants. You can call them and ask them, what's the weather going to be like in Denver this weekend? And they will stay on the phone and talk to you about it. And so but Starbucks, Whole Foods, these are companies that are mentioned. And here is, for any of the listeners that might be skeptical about whether or not this whole idea of the patient coming second works, I'm reading now from the book. The authors found that the companies on their list produced an impressive 1,025% return for their investors over a 10-year period. In comparison, the companies in the S&P 500 index produced a mere 122% return over the same period. That's astonishing. So it's right there that the data proves what you've discovered,
yes,
Britt, that not only is it feel good and make people happier, but if you're just a hardcore capitalist looking for, show me the money, well, you get that too, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's an interesting dynamic in healthcare, because in these startups and these tech companies, it's easy to throw a ping pong table out in the middle of the work area, right?
Yep.
My son worked for a finance company, and they had free breakfast and a workout gym, and they had basketball and lunch, and just a fun, engaging, and the bosses would have all sorts of fun contests because they liked each other. In healthcare, we've never played in that area.
Right.
We have never done that. And so when I was at Medical City, we decided to have employee forums. And your typical CEO, trained and matriculated through CEO-dom, we'll say, okay, it's a town hall meeting, and I'm going to get up and I'm going to share the strategic plan. And nurses are rolling their eyes and da da da. So medical city, we decided to have fun. So we had this auditorium, and we took T-shirts and we wrapped them up and we would throw them, and we would ask questions, and we would dress up in crazy hats, and we made funny video. I dressed up as Britt Man and the Boy Blunder, and we got on a motor scooter and filmed it driving around the hospital campus, demonstrating the service standards of how to answer phone calls and how to say hello to people. I did something funny. We had an issue with elevator etiquette, and I put my desk and a telephone in the elevator. We have a large service employee elevator, and as people walked in, I'd act like I was at my office, and I'd demonstrate appropriate telephone etiquette. Good afternoon. This is Britt in administration. May I help you? And at that time and place, people would pick up the phone and go, "What? What do you want?"
Yeah. So
we really got outside the comfort zone and really were way out there. But I tell you, it worked. We beat, as I mentioned, the numbers work for themselves. Most leaders in healthcare are fearful to do this. So those that are doing it, that are following that model, having wild success. I could give you name after name after name of individuals that have that Zappos mentality, and it's driving economic change for them. But it's scary. It's concerning, and most are afraid to do it. And I guess I'm an apostle of appreciation. I'm an evangelist of excitement. I'm trying to preach this. Change how you lead, and you'll find the successes that you hope. And, so Medical City was an example of that. When I went to Presby Dallas, I brought a number of my team members. We did the exact same thing and found huge success as well at Texas Health Presbyterian Hospital, Dallas. So it works. It really works.
Well, and you mentioned that it is scary because, like you mentioned in the book, it's one thing when you're selling shoes, or you're selling coffee, or you're selling groceries, but you're trying to empower employees who are in literally, someone's life is at stake. So that is, but at the same time, I can tell you, so I just had a firsthand experience with this. My mom, she had an aneurysm and a brain hemorrhage over Easter weekend. This is like the most colossal thing that our family has ever endured. It was earth shattering. Life flight her to a hospital, Christus in Tyler, and the staff there has been absolutely phenomenal. And it's interesting because a lot of people don't think about this, and it didn't even occur to me. And I've researched this ad nauseum for my entrepreneurial project in graduate school, retail medicine, and a lot of the things you're talking about. It didn't really even occur to me till I had that experience that I couldn't tell you one thing about really her medication regimen she was on, when the IVs went in and out, all that. But I can tell you the names of the nurses that we liked. I can tell you the names of the physicians who communicated well. I can tell you how, and that's all my dad, who this was obviously the most traumatic experience of his life. All he will remember about that experience is how the employees treated him, my mom, the rest of the family, and made that stay. And the bottom line is, it's very difficult to get an employee who is not happy where they are to have that sort of attitude toward the end user, the actual customer. It's almost impossible. So I think, to your point, and now, and this is kind of, I want to kind of segue here real quick. So now what we've gone from is kind of, like you talk about the old Roman soldier type mentality of wear the uniform, wear the badge, do as you're told, to now there is more competition in healthcare, which I think competition always tends to improve a market. You're seeing urgent care centers pop up everywhere. You're seeing now freestanding emergency rooms. That seems like a very viable solution to help some of our healthcare woes, which you mentioned in the book. I tend to agree with that. America has the best healthcare system in the entire, world, bar none. where do we go as it relates, not just, and I want to keep this as purely from a practitioner from an executive level, given the state of healthcare in America today, where do you see it evolving from where we are to what's going to keep us out of a single payer system, or where do we go from here?
Well, that's a great question, and there's all sorts of dynamics and areas. Let me just tease out a couple of points. I think healthcare is going to continue to become more complicated, and we're going to cure more things. This is the golden age of healthcare. We're going to cure cancer. We're going to figure out Alzheimer's and Parkinson's and all these neurological diseases. It is an exciting time in healthcare. But to make that happen, the teams that create success will have to be interdisciplinary. They're going to have to work together. They're going to have to be collaborative. The old days when I'm the doctor and you're going to take my orders, right?
Mm-hmm,
they call them orders. You're going to do as I say. Those days are over.
Yeah.
So physicians and clinicians who embrace this nurse ratchet mentality of punitive behavior, they're gone. They will wallow in mediocrity, but they will go down kicking and screaming along the way. I guarantee you. The next generation, these new physicians, these new clinicians who collaborate and work together and talk and discuss, and that they're encouraged to do so, they're going to be successful. Organizations that hold on to the nurse ratchet or the captain of the ship, they will attract those kind of people, and they will isolate themselves, and they will fail. I worry about big academic centers that aren't nimble and willing to change, where their culture is archaic and transactional. I worry about them, but I look to new and innovative solutions. I think consumers are going to push healthcare out of the hospitals into the home setting or assisted living or wearable devices. I think you're going to see much. Take a look at Fitbit.
Yeah.
For crying out loud. Everyone has a Fitbit or an iWatch. They're going to own their responsibility to improve their health. But as it relates to clinicians, one of the great things we did at Medical City NTHR is we identified the whiners, the losers, and the jerks, and we fired them. And we promoted the winners, the workers, and the goofs. And I use that term loosely, but winners, workers, and goofs saying, have fun working on a team.
Yeah.
Enjoy working with that nurse, because the patients recognize it, realize it, and they're clinically more competent.
Yep.
They're willing to say, well, listen, I'm not quite sure what the impact is of X, Y, and Z. Can we talk about this? Oh, you're right. That was incorrectly entered into the electronic health record. Good catch on that, as opposed to shut up and do what I told you. Those are orders.
Right.
Okay, I'll never question you, and you have an adverse drug reaction. So I think you mentioned Christus Health. I'm working with them. I love that group and that organization. I've been invited to speak at their national meeting in San Diego. They're the kind of organization that gets it, that's engaging and participative. Great leadership there, and great organizations are emerging. So you'll see those ones emerge successful, and I think you'll see the calcification of old theory, old mentality. I think my daughter's a pediatric ICU nurse. She works the night shift, and it's fun listening to what the night shift has to say about managers. She loves her manager because her manager listens to her. So when there's a call in and another employee's sick, she'll go in, and I say, well, why do you do that, sir? And she goes, because I just love my manager. She's there for me. Thinking, come on, Sherlock.
Right.
This is the way you need to lead in healthcare.
Right.
And I think that's what the future will hold. I think that great organizations like the Christus of the world will do amazing things. I think they will get outside of the hospital setting. They'll get into the ambulatory and the post-acute setting. They'll look at longitudinal care. I think consumers will own more of their healthcare. I don't predict a single payer, but what I do predict is we will get away from healthcare insurance as we currently know it. Car insurance, my car insurance doesn't pay for my gas chain,
right?
Gas fill-ups. or my oil changes, so I think individuals will be responsible for their physicals and their primary care. But when it's something acute like heart failure or chronic disease, then that's when the insurance will kick in to help their economics. But I think individuals will assume more responsibility. The entrepreneurs, the smart ones, are going to get on that. They're going to figure out how you create wearable devices and connectivity with electronic medical record and their iPhone. I think that's where we're going. Great organizations that are nimble, have great teams that collaborate and coordinate, they'll be brilliantly successful. And I think that economic factor will be, something that we'll look back at as confirmation that great teams create great financial results.
I love it. All makes perfect sense. And and the thing is too, and maybe I'm just a little bit romantic about the whole system in which we operate here in America with all of its problems. I think it is the only system that allows for that creativity, that nimble structure to be constructed. I really think, and it is an exciting time. There's, I've mentioned this before on the podcast as well as some of my blog postings, is that while we are a divided nation, there's so many problems in the world. There always have been, there always will be. But man, it is an exciting time to be alive. It is an exciting time to be a human on planet Earth. It's just really a fantastic time. There's some cool things happening.
Yeah, I agree.
All right.
I agree wholeheartedly. And let me just put an exclamation point about healthcare. In general, it is a $3 trillion industry. There's no question about it. There is economic advantage. Hogs get fed, pigs pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered.
Right.
I worry about the medical industrial complex that the intent is economic advantage, and so you will have some untoward behavior. I think industry leaders need to rise up and respond to that inappropriate behavior. Do I think there's economics associated with healthcare? Yeah, sure there are. It's a hard industry. There should be benefit, but we need to be very attentive to the importance of blessing the lives of the patients in the communities we serve. I think that needs to be our mantra, and that's why people get into healthcare. So I'm like you, very optimistic about the future of healthcare and this next generation of leaders. I'm very encouraged and very excited.
Well, this has all been so fantastic, Britt. But before we leave, I like to surmise what I've gleaned from the conversation. So, with regard to some of the keys to your successes, as I have gathered through this, one, surround yourself with good people that you trust, you like to be around, and not only folks that you can rely on, but you're willing to pour into as well and be there for them, and vice versa. Be willing to stick to your guns when you know something's right, even whenever you may have forces coming against you. You stick to it, but again, have those advisors to support you through those times. And then third, have fun. Make it a fun environment. Make the people around you, let them have a good time. Have a good time yourself. Anything else? Take yourself back to that BYU undergrad, just getting started. What are anything that I might have missed that you would tell through that now much larger rearview mirror, because you've lived some life, the habits and the strategies that took you from starting your career to the zenith of a healthcare career? What are those habits that you can look back on your career and go, I did this, this, and this every step of the way, and it yielded positive results?
I think I'll finish with this thought and a story. I think we need to find our purpose, our calling in life, our meaning. I think that's very important. For me, it occurred while I was in, the mountains of Peru trying to figure out my life. Find out what your purpose, your meaning is, what your calling in life. And I think you can be divinely directed on that. I absolutely believe it. Once that's clear, or you see some direction, go for it. Move forward. don't look back. Don't back up. Just keep on going. I recall one of the things at Presbyterian Hospital I did was I decided that every month I would drop off treats to the night shift. And I used to work the night shift and felt like I was a little unappreciated. So I decided that every month I would get a big trays and big carts full of treats, and I'd roll them to the different floors. Now, Presbyterian Hospital Dallas is almost 3 million square feet of office space and hospital space and 5 big towers. So I'd start at about 10 or 11, just as the night shift came on, and I'd roll those carts around. And I had a route, and, during February, I'd drop off Valentine's treats. And in March, it would be a St. Patrick's theme. And in May, it would be a spring. And it just different things, cookies, cake pops, cupcakes, just fun things. And I recall one evening I was driving home, and it was about 4 a.m, and I knew I had to get home, shower and shave, and get back up for a meeting with surgeons at about 6:30. And I said to myself, why am I doing this? This is killing me. I'm an old man. I'm exhausted. And I'll tell you, Jason, what gave me strength was a reaffirmation of my purpose and meaning. And I thought to myself, I just love these men and women, that the time that I spend with them is value added, and they appreciate this effort. And it's a small sacrifice for the greater good. So that gave me encouragement. And so my last words of advice is find your purpose, find your meaning, find what your calling in life is, and then go for it. Just keep moving forward, and amazing things happen. That's been my experience.
Wow, I think that's incredible. And there's one last question that I started last podcast. I want to ask every leader that I talk to. So in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, there's the story of you come to a church, you hear music playing, the door opens, you walk in, you realize, oh my goodness, I'm at a funeral. You walk up to the casket to see who it is, and it's Britt Berrett. What do you want to be said when this is all said and done about you? How does your eulogy read?
I thought about this a lot. I went through the 7 habits, and I wrote down all the things that I would hope they would say about me, and I have that in my personal mission statement. Yeah. And so I have that quite clear. But I'd have you reflect on the last scenes of Saving Private Ryan. Remember that one?
Absolutely.
And I cry every time I see it. Here's a man whose life was saved by by his brothers, and at the end of his life, when he is 80, he kneels down by this tombstone and says, "Am I a good man? Did I live a good life?" And so that's what I hope, that I will be known to have been a good man and to have lived a good life.
Wow. Very, very well said. Britt Berrett, I cannot begin to express to you how grateful I am for you taking this time with me. I know the listeners will benefit greatly. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Pleasure being with you. Thanks again.
All right. Thanks, Britt. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of the Texas Titans podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at JasonWrightTX1. That's Jason Wright TX, the number 1, or on Facebook at Jason Wright Now. For show notes and upcoming interviews, please visit TexTitans.blog. I also encourage you to visit my personal website at jasonwrightnow.com, where you can download a free copy of my book, Push Play, Taking Your Life Off Pause, for free just by subscribing. Please, please, please remember to subscribe to the podcast and share it with others. I'm truly grateful for you being a part of this journey with me. Get out there and do something titanic. Until next time, thank you so much for listening.